How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Rocky Mountain EDC channel. For today's video, we're going to be looking at the overview and impressions of the Spyderco Manix 2. If you've watched the channel, you can insinuate or get a little hint that I am a fan of Spyderco knives. And if you haven't, check out the Spyderco Manix 2 versus PM2 video that is out on the channel to also kind of see how I feel about the Manix 2 compared to its, in my opinion, very comparable companion here from Spyderco knives. Now, today's video is simply just looking at the Manix 2 because I have a video out there looking at the PM2 and the Tenacious, but not one specifically looking at the Manix 2. And I think this knife needs to be talked a little bit about on the channel. Now, if you enjoy this video, please give it a like. It definitely helps out the channel. Lets me know what you guys enjoy to see. So give it a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. And if you're not already, subscribe to the Rocky Mountain EDC channel. I upload weekly content, typically knives and everyday carry gear. So make sure to subscribe if you enjoy this content. Thanks. So let's talk a little bit about, just very briefly, some of the history behind the Manix 2. Now, obviously with Spyderco knives, it's going to have that very traditional Spyderco look, right? We got the big round thumb hole, and we have that very distinct leaf blade shape, right? Now, Sal and Eric Lesser, obviously father and son of the company, this is going to be predominantly Eric's design. In my opinion, this is kind of Eric's take at another ergonomic Spyderco knife that's heavy duty enough for most everyday tasks, and kind of challenges the PM2 in a way. So this was obviously a joint collaboration between father and son, but in looking at Eric's design, we can kind of see some similarities, obviously just Spyderco in general, but very similar design profiles, but some very unique differences. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. So we have to kind of look at this knife as very comparable in that full-sized knife EDC realm. So it's going to have the standard things that we would expect on a Spyderco knife. Like I said, it has this very nice thumb hole that all Spyderco knives have for easy access, right? So you can just roll it out. It's ambidextrous, which is great. Reversible pocket clip. Now this one is going to be just for tip up carry, not tip down carry, which could be seen as a possible downside to the knife, but I think for a lot of those in the knife community, carrying tip up is typically preferred. At least for me, I prefer all my knives to be carried tip up. Just preference. I'm not going to knock a knife if it is tipped down, but I do prefer tip up, as I think would most. Now, part of the reason why this is not a tip down design and why it's only going to be carried tip up like this is because of the locking mechanism. And that's really going to be one of the big features of the Manix 2 that makes this knife unique. And it's really, in a lot of ways, I mean, it's Spyderco's real own knife that's going to have the ball bearing lock. This line of knives, the Manix line, that has this ball bearing lock. Now, the ball bearing lock is obviously going to be another very ambidextrous lock compared to the compression lock. And it kind of also strengthens and takes into account things like the axis lock. And in a lot of ways, I think it takes the components of the compression lock and the axis locking kind of improves upon them in a lot of ways. So you have a coil spring that is going to push up on a plastic cage, and inside that cage is going to be a ball bearing, and that pushing of this coil spring up on that ball bearing is actually going to push that ball bearing in between the blade and the tang and the stop pin of the knife. So really, this is a amazing design in terms of that strength of the lock. And what's even better, very similar to the axis lock design, is that ball bearing, similar to the crossbar in the axis lock, is it also acts as the detent. So we also have that ball in there, that tension of the spring in the ball and the tang of the blade also acts as a detent. Now, it is a very soft detent, which makes it really enjoyable to roll out for very smooth opening. And that's one thing that you don't really get on the PM2. You get a very hard, if you can tell, you get a very distinct, very hard detent in terms of keeping that blade in there. Makes it really nice for snapping it out, but this is a lot smoother. If you notice, there's not really much of that detent stick. It's locked in there good, for sure, in terms of keeping it in place, but it allows a much smoother opening, which is a really nice feature and something that you kind of take for granted, or you don't realize a whole lot when using this knife compared to a lot of the traditional small detent ball on whatever locking mechanism you're looking at. So that is definitely one of the biggest features of this knife, is that special lock, that caged ball bearing lock. Now, in terms of this version, this is obviously just going to be the standard S30V and black G10 version. Now, I will say it does have full stainless steel liners inside on top with the G10. This does add a little bit more heft to it, which actually it actually feels pretty good for the knife. It feels pretty well balanced, and I think the ergonomics are going to help out with that a lot. But it is going to be a very strong handle. I mean, you're not going to be breaking or doing any major damage to the handle. It's not a, you know, it's not meant for light duty work like something like the Benchmade Bug Out, right? So it is that full stainless steel construction. Really nice, good grippy G10, just like you expect from Spyderco. And some really good ergonomics on this knife. Really good swells and divots for your hand placement. We have a much more gradual ramp on the thumb ramp here with this really fine jimping, and that is going to be, again, very different from this more aggressive, very sharp ramp. And even things with like the Tenacious, we can see a little bit of that difference there as well, which this fine ramp is actually really nice. It's very comfortable. It allows you to adjust and not feel really constricted by the blade in terms of having to put your thumb on this ramp, and then it's kind of awkward if you want to go a little further up on the blade itself. So that's pretty nice. Some moderate jimping all around on the handle. This is going to be a very grippy knife, to say the least, as well as here up on this kind of front finger choil, which is really nice, and also on this back kind of primary index finger spot. To say the least, this is a very comfortable and ergonomic knife. I mean, you're not going to be having this slip out of your hand very easily compared to, you know, maybe something that is a little slicker like this carbon fiber on a Civivi Elementum, right? It's going to be very good for a working and cutting knife for your daily tasks. And again, very standard blade steel, CPM S30V. We have a really nice leaf-shaped blade, which this is going to give a really almost more of a drop point style blade. Much more gradual versus a kind of a sharp drop and upsweep, very slight upsweep in terms of the belly on something like the PM2. So this makes this a very well-rounded blade style. You got some straight, you got just a little bit of curvature in the blade to give it a little bit of that extra utility when slicing and having to pull through. But it's also going to be really good for any type of downward motion like this, like chopping, as well as just standard pull cutting when you're cutting through something like a tough material like rope. It's going to be really good for that. Overall, the Manix 2 is just a well-rounded knife. And I think that many of those in the knife community and those that are enjoyers of Spyderco knives know that the Manix 2 is for sure a classic knife. And it's up there with the PM2. And if you kind of want to know my opinions about the head-to-head of the PM2 versus the Manix 2, make sure to check out the Manix 2 versus Spyderco PM2 video up on the channel. Definitely a really cool video looking at a lot of the details of these two knives. And I think this knife definitely holds its own, not just in terms of the company itself, but compared to a lot of other knife companies as well. So the Manix 2 is a great knife. I think it's actually very reasonably priced for what you're going to get. In some cases, you can find this as low as about $150. You might be looking closer to around $170 for this knife. But for considering what you get, this is really very well priced. Just to kind of give you a little perspective if you're unsure about the size of this knife, here is it compared up to things like the Civivi Elementum, Benchmade Bug Out. Okay, so it's obviously going to be bigger than those two knives. Very similar, just in length, close to the Bug Out, just a little bit longer. And then obviously compared to its brother in here of the Spyderco family, it's going to be much more comparable in length to the Tenacious. The Tenacious is going to be a little bit smaller compared to the Manix 2, and the PM2 is just going to barely be longer than the Manix 2 there. So really great, well-rounded knife. Love the blade design, love the lock style, love the ergonomics. Definitely a fantastic knife, and if you are thinking about getting this or on the fence about it, I highly recommend you give it a shot. And like I tell everyone, if you have the ability or the chance to get it in hand, if you can go to a local knife store and you're able to actually hold this knife in hand, I would definitely recommend that with any knife to see if you really like it before you buy it. But nonetheless, there's this video for you guys if you're not able to do that. So thanks for watching, and again, make sure to subscribe to the Rocky Mountain EDC channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks.